I haven't used this in a really long time.
What what is that?
It's a Bluetooth keyboard.
Ah,
It's super cute.
I couldn't tell if that was like a makeup case or what it was.
It folds in half. It's like this.
Yeah.
It looks like about as big as a passport, and then you go whoosh, and then it turns on.
Pretty cool. Does that connect pretty reliably?
I barely use it. It's been sitting in a drawer.
So you don't know.
It was replaced with the keyboard folio for my other iPad. But now that I have this iPad, which is enormous,
Yep.
And there is no keyboard case for it, then I have to use this one. Did that work? It did work. We are in business. How do you go into the multitasking thing with a keyboard?
Oh, I don't know.
What, Daniel? You use a keyboard. You literally using a keyboard with your iPad
What
right
do you
now.
mean when you say the multitasking?
How do you go into like
thing?
what's it called? The like expose or whatever.
Expose? I'm not sure. There's got to be a command for it though, right?
Well, yeah, but what is it?
Well, it's not Command Tab.
Oh
That's just an Alt Tab thing.
Can't you like hold down like one of the like keyboard space or something for it to bring up the
Yeah,
the
it's
shortcuts?
the world button.
I don't have a world button.
You don't have that.
I have an option button. Is function the same as world?
I think that's the button. I think that's what it's supposed to be.
Oh.
You hit that one. I
Well,
don't know.
Let me just look at this a little closer. There's a copy paste. There's a forward backward. There's a home. Maybe it's the home button.
So on mine,
Nope. Home literally
first
goes
off,
home.
the iPad keyboard doesn't have an escape button, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
But on mine, I have this button that looks like a world.
Yep.
And if I hit that and hit up, I think that's like that shows you all the windows.
Oh.
So I don't know what you do if you don't have that button.
If you don't have a world button, I'm sure I could bind it to something. There's a lock button.
Like if you had like an emoji button, it's basically the same thing.
Maybe I have to switch it to iOS mode. Whatever. It's not a problem. I mean, it's kind of a problem because I would like to be able to do that, but whatever. Let me just finish stage managing here. This is very good radio. Do. Daniel, have you heard of this Rebloom application?
I have not.
It's like an AI skin retouching tool and uses AI to retouch your skin.
Doesn't sound interesting to me.
What if all the photos you take of all those people when you got to do skin retouching?
Man, it's as real as it gets. We're not doing that.
I feel like I don't dig into new like photo tools enough. I feel like we do it for video stuff, but I'm not really, on the cutting edge of photo
That's probably
software
true.
technology.
You're still using Lightroom.
Is that bad?
No, I just mean like you've been using the same program for a long time.
Yeah,
and
like
you're still using that program.
People use like plugins and stuff for Lightroom,
yeah.
but plugins really only work for Lightroom Classic.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't figure out if when are they gonna merge those two?
Yeah, it always stresses me out having multiple options like that because some people want to stick on Classic, some people want the features in the new one, and I don't know what to do because it's like I don't want to have this decision. I just want you to put all of your features in one program, and I'll use that one.
Yeah, that sounds great. There's like a slide over thing now on the Lightroom regular where you can like edit local files.
Oh, that's cool.
You can't do the AI noise reduction in the mobile version.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy because why can't I have an M4 iPad?
Yeah.
Let me do like all the things.
Yeah. It's as powerful as a computer. Like,
yeah.
It should be able to do it. Kind of on that same topic, Apple just bought Pixelmator, which is, a pretty well-known photo program thing for Mac.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, is that something that people should be considering? Like, should I use Pixelmator? Like, I use a Mac. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure they're just going to like deprecate it or whatever eventually. Do you think that they would are they just going to roll it into like photos or whatever? Or do you think they're going to re-release Aperture?
Well, yeah, because people were saying it's been like 10 years or something since they had Aperture. And so maybe they would I think they should keep it. It's a well-designed program, and I think a lot of people like it. And maybe that should become their pro editing software, where like Photos is the casual one, and then you've got this other thing for pro
Is
work.
Pixelmator more like, I've never used it. I've always wanted to buy it, but then I just have never gotten around to using it. Is it more like Photoshop or is it more like Lightroom?
I'm not sure. I'm not going to try and guess.
Okay. like the main reason I use Lightroom is for catalog management.
Yeah.
Like
I would say differently. Like Lightroom and Photoshop, I think, are very different programs.
Yes.
And I like that Lightroom has photo editing specific controls. And so that's what I'm not sure is. I don't know if Pixelmator is that or if it's like Photoshop.
Yeah. Well, maybe we're just terrible for not knowing that information.
Yeah, maybe so.
I found that I look at and experience my photo library more when I have some sort of application to view and organize and work with them in.
Yeah.
And whenever they were just in a directory on my computer, they just kind of existed there and I never saw them.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so I very much enjoy having them all in a place and switching to Lightroom with like cloud. So I just have all of my photos and all of the RAWs everywhere has been working out really well for me.
And it is nice that it's cross-platform where like, I know you don't really use a Windows computer for personal stuff, but like if you were to use a Windows computer, you'd be able to do that with Lightroom, whereas like Apple Photos is only going to be on Apple stuff.
Or like there's a web version of Lightroom that's very similar to the mobile app, and you can pull it up on any computer,
that's cool.
whether it's yours or not, and then find your photo and like export the JPEG or whatever you need to do. The only big downside of it is that like the search is kind of bad, and the ability to filter is nowhere near as good as Lightroom Classic. There's so many classic features that just like need to make their way into Lightroom regular if they're ever going to like merge the two. And I know they want Lightroom not Classic to be more simple or whatever, but also the naming is messed up.
Yeah. I don't know. It's all confusing, and I wish they would, kind of do like what Apple does with their hardware, where it's like, stop giving so many choices and like filter this down, like make it simpler, make it easier to pick between the things. Yeah.
Or at least name it something else.
Yeah.
I mean, I see why they don't want to call it like Lightroom Light or whatever.
Yeah, that wouldn't sound Lightroom Light. That'd be confusing.
Maybe name the other one Lightroom Heavy.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I don't think we're actually ready, Daniel. We didn't do a show rundown before this.
Oh my gosh.
Like we just
so many things.
Kind of like jumped the gun, and then you haven't asked me about my iPad at all. It's just a whole thing.
Yeah, it is a whole thing. I mean, you kind of mentioned the iPad, but yeah, you've got that in front of you, and I can barely see you. It's so big. It's obscuring the entire area between us.
Yes, indeed. Through ambiguous means, I have come to be in the possession of a 12.9-inch M4 iPad Pro.
Got that OLED screen.
Yep. Screen's pretty good, Daniel.
Yeah. So your previous one was I think an M2.
Yes.
11-inch iPad Pro.
Right.
And now you have the newer one. I think they skipped the M3. I don't think they made it.
Correct. Yeah, it's just the very next generation, but in larger size. Which motivation for that was like a lot of different workflows that I do that kind of make sense as far as like using the pen and that sort of stuff. But I don't know, man. It's the screen is like, I would say it's probably like 20% better than the other screen.
Like in what ways have you noticed that so far?
The like just kind of obviously like the contrast ratios, the brightness. There's a little more like punch to the colors. Looks like less washed out just because it's an OLED screen, so it has a like punchier look. It seems a little sharper, and then it like the refreshed like responsiveness is a little better from the pen and touch input, and so like scrolling and everything just feels more smooth, and it feels a little brighter. It's that tandem OLED. And so
do you ever use your iPad in a dark room, like not like a film development dark room, but like
there are times when I use my iPad and it's set to minimum brightness.
Yeah, and so I'm curious if have you tried that with the OLED yet?
Yeah, it doesn't feel any like dimmer or not or whatever.
I would have thought maybe that would be better. So.
Yeah, I mean it's like even if it is better, the surface area of this is the equivalent of like a surfboard.
That's true.
And so it's just like having a giant panel light.
Have you tried using it outside yet? So you talked about minimum brightness, but what about maximum brightness?
I have not really used it outside
I'm
yet.
kind of curious about that because normally that's a problem that OLEDs have is that they're not quite as bright, but I think they use some like tandem OLED thing or something, and it's supposed to be pretty bright.
Right,
so
they did.
I'm curious to see if that's better.
I mostly have issues with overhead lights more than anything, so I'll report back on how bright it is. There are a few things that have been weird for me. One is I I bought one of those like folio style cases, and with every other iPad I've ever owned, when I fold the trifold into like a bunch on one side, I kind of use it as a handle to hold the iPad. But this one, it's too wide. Like the fold over is too wide for me to like get a good like purchase on.
I mean, everything about it is just huge.
It's just freaking enormous.
Last question on the screen, actually. They have a nano texture option for this, but you did not get that.
You have to have get the 1 terabyte option,
okay.
and I had a budget.
You also have to like officially use the Apple polishing cloth or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work with anything else. If you try to polish it with anything else, it just doesn't come off.
Yeah, it just shuts down.
Yeah, it turns off.
Okay, so no nano texture glass.
No,
but you're having a hard time holding it with the folio.
Right. The whole thing is like really surprisingly light and surprisingly thin, and then you add the folio to it, and then it becomes 50% heavier.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of had the same problem. Like the Magic Keyboard is easily as heavy as the iPad.
It's ridiculous.
And so it's very noticeable. And like honestly, most of the time I leave the keyboard on, but the times I take it off when I want to just use the iPad as a tablet, I'm like, oh, this doesn't weigh a ton. Like this is noticeably lighter than a laptop.
Yeah, like the weight distribution and everything, even though it's like 200 or 300 grams heavier than my other iPad, probably about 200, they feel almost equivalent whenever you're just holding the bare iPad itself.
I guess it's because it's bigger. It's like, it is heavier, but because it's bigger, it sort of feels like it's heavier than the other one.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I guess like the density is the same or whatever.
Yeah, I think where I'm going to land on this is that I'm going to love hate it, but I haven't gotten to the point where I hate it. I'm just blown away at how large it is.
Does it fit in the bags that you would carry it in?
Everything but the Peak Design sling bag. I actually haven't even tried to stick it in there. I just know it's not going to fit.
Yeah, I have one bag that I sometimes take on planes. It's just like a little sling backpack thing.
Yeah.
And the 11-inch iPad like barely fits in that. And it does fit, but it barely fits. And that's one thing that's kept me from getting a 13-inch is knowing that when I fly, I like to use that bag. And I wouldn't be able to do that with the bigger one.
Like you mostly use your iPad with a keyboard.
Yeah.
If you're a keyboard iPad person, this thing just screams, I want to be used with a keyboard.
Yeah.
It like I don't know if it's because I restored the backup from my other iPad when I turned it on, but like it had Stage Manager like turned on by default. And I'm like opening apps and just open them in like normal size, but like within Stage Manager. And it feels more Mac-like just because you have more screen and it's a lot easier to multi-window. Whereas with my other iPad, I would frequently like switch between like split view and like the split view type and then the Stage Manager. And this one, I'm like living in Stage Manager.
I have a feeling my next one will be the big one because of that. Because it seems like for multitasking, it's just a lot better.
I feel like I have so much room, which is weird because on a 13-inch laptop, I'm like, oh, geez, I wish I had like maybe a little more space. But on this, I'm like, boy, what am I going to do with all this room for activities?
Yep. Just have random extra space left over.
Just unbelievable. And now that I figured out like the power of dragging and dropping on iOS, I don't like drag and dropping everywhere. It's great. It's so good. What I learned is that I've always thought about the paradigm of an iPad being like a tablet of paper. Like equivalent to the size of here's like a yellow notepad or a clipboard.
Right.
That size, like in my head, I'm like, that's like what an iPad is. You can use it as a digital version of a physical tablet. This is the exact same size as like a 8.5 by 11 tablet of like paper or whatever. Like I set this on top of one of those, exact same size.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if that was on purpose.
It has to be, but I was like, oh, okay. So like this paradigm maybe makes more sense, but also it makes me feel like I'm carrying a clipboard around with me all the time, which is very different from like, oh, I can just leave my phone in the house and then like carry my iPad around with me, use my iPad like my phone because blah, 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 blah. This makes that a lot more weird.
Yeah.
And
it feels more like you're carrying a computer around with you.
And like, I hate doing text entry on the iPad because like they got rid of like the good, like what I need is either to like, I can make the small keyboard, but like, let me resize it so that it's half the width of the screen. Cause like, it's too small and I get rid of like the number rows and that's annoying.
And now do they let you do the split keyboard?
No, they took away the 2-thumb split version.
Because I used to have like the old style iPad before they went to this modern USB-C one. They had an iPad Pro that looked like a regular iPad, and I had that like a 10.5-inch one.
Yeah.
And on that one, I could like pull my thumbs apart and get a split keyboard where I could hold the iPad with both hands and have both thumbs with the keyboard. It was great. It worked really, really well. And I don't know why they took that away.
They're like, it only works with the home button. What?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's like, guys, the software feature. So like they took that away, and then I mean, like if I could, the keyboard on the bottom, if you just do like the standard pop-up keyboard, like with the 11-inch, I can kind of like hold it and use my thumbs in portrait mode.
Even that's uncomfortable. And on the 13, I'm sure it's ridiculous.
And, it's ridiculous on the 13. So you basically have to like set it down or whatever, and then you can't swipe text the big keyboard. You can only swipe text the small keyboard. It's just like they're so compromised, and it just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is this not better?
Yeah, it really feels like if you're doing heavy text entry, like anything more than typing in a username and password, it really feels like you need some kind of external keyboard.
Yeah, it does feel like they're kind of pushing that, which is dumb because it's an iPad, and I prefer to use it without the keyboard 90% of the time.
Yep.
So, which is why I'm kind of stuck of like, I don't want to spend $250 on an open box smart like Magic Keyboard for this, even though it begs to have a Magic Keyboard, but it's like so heavy, and I don't want to carry it around. And they don't make the Folio, which is the keyboard that I had for my other iPad.
Yeah, the Folio one's just like a regular case, but the foldy part has a keyboard on it.
Yep, exactly. And so now here I am bringing back out my fold-in-half portable keyboard, which is the almost exact width as the iPad. So
it honestly probably is the right option for what you're doing, but the Folio kind of like... So the reason I like the Magic Keyboard is because I can put it on my lap and use it well that way. And I feel like the Folio kind of works that way. The Bluetooth thing you have really doesn't work that way at all.
No, it doesn't.
That's a downside.
Yeah. So I don't know what to do about that yet, but the pencil and all the drawing and everything is fantastic.
Yeah, because they changed the pencil. So what did they add to that?
They added like, you can like roll it. And so, like, if you have like a highlighter that's the shadow where like it shows the fake shadow over the pen is like a little more obvious.
So the shadow thing they added with the M2, and that was why I bought the M2 over the M1, because that feature's great. Like being able to see where you're going to put the pencil down before you actually push it down. I like that.
Well, like previously they added the hover thing where it's like you can see the dot of where it's going to write, but
that's what I'm referring to. Is that
I don't remember like. In like GoodNotes, when I bring the pen down over the iPad, it shows a literal shadow of the pen.
Yeah, that's new.
And that's
definitely new.
Yeah, I was like, that wasn't on the other version. That's kind of interesting.
It's kind of cool.
The haptic feedback is weird because like I'll squeeze the pen and it'll buzz in my hand. But being able to like squeeze it and like scroll through the like whatever tool palette you are on, which works in GoodNotes already, which is great. You can just like quickly like squeeze it and then like pick your thing instead of having to like move your hand significantly to go like switch tools.
That's nice.
Yeah, just overall, like, it's all like it's like 10% better in so many different ways, and I haven't decided how much I love or hate the big screen.
Yeah, I think that you as an iPad Power user, it seems like that upgrade makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially because you wanted the bigger screen. I feel like I probably want to go that route eventually, but I think I'm going to wait one more generation before I do.
It's like substantially thinner than the other one.
Yeah, I kind of forget about that.
I haven't done any color grading with it yet, and I'm excited to do that because
like photo editing, color grading, like if you feel like it's better for those things.
I did like a little messing around with photos, but I'm going to go through and like colors and do some like photo editing in Lightroom, but the color grading in Resolve I like doing on the iPad because like some of the wheel stuff is a little easier or nicer to do when you're like interacting it with your hands and the pencil rather than like a mouse. You're just a little more connected.
And it's also probably the most color accurate screen you have, although I guess the Mac is going to be equal.
Yeah,
probably.
I guess like I feel like I have a little more precision of like if you're looking at the color wheel in DaVinci Resolve and you like click on it with a mouse and you're trying to drag it to like adjust the color, more often than not, I'm dragging it so far that I can't see the difference on the screen in pixels of how far it actually moved.
Yep.
I'm like, why do I have so much like, well, not resolution, but like, I don't know. It's like you can go like all the way, but I'm never going to go all the way.
Yeah. It's like you want to zoom in or something.
Yeah, and so, but being able to do it with like the pen on an iPad, I just feel like I have more precision.
Yeah,
but the size of the preview window is so freaking small, and so it's like hard. You're kind of weighing between the two. But now, like this thing is basically almost as big as my 14-inch MacBook Pro.
It really is. It's very close.
It's like, I'm just going to try to color grade our next project on this thing.
Yep.
It's going to be great. Woof.
Cool. Well, you seem very excited about all this. I think it's neat that you got the chance to try both sizes, and like now you have both of them, and you can see which one you end up using more. Because I think for your for some of your work stuff, some of the reasons you bought that iPad, I think it's going to be great. But
Yep.
I'm curious for like casual use if it's going to feel like it was worth it over the smaller size.
Yeah, we'll see if I like start leaning to go back to the other one. Right now, I'm just using only this one, and so I'll keep reaching for only this one until I get tired of doing it. But maybe I just won't. Maybe I'm just like big phone, big iPad.
Maybe you could live that multi-iPad lifestyle and use them both at once.
Man, it's just more things to carry around.
Yeah, I don't know though. Could be worth it.
No. Unlikely.
I don't think so. Fine.
All right, Daniel, click this link in the show notes here.
This link that's like hundreds and hundreds of characters long.
It's not my fault that it's a bad link.
That's pretty weird looking. That camera has too many colors.
Can you describe what this is?
I mean, so it's made by Hasselblad. It looks like a normal camera, kind of, but it has a really weird grip and some weird knobs and stuff on top. And it's yellow and red and black, and that's a strange color combination, and it's pretty weird looking.
Yeah, and it has an interchangeable lens mount. It is APS-C, and it says Hasselblad on it. And this thing is like 2011, and it is the Hasselblad Lunar Limited Edition mirrorless camera.
24.3 megapixels.
Yep, you got it. 24 megapixels. And this thing is basically terrible. It goes up to 16,000 ISO. And it's from 2013. And it looks like a camera from 2013. But it looks amazing. And apparently, like, this is a limited edition version, but there's a lot of different versions of this camera with like polished wooden grips and stuff. And it's like super duper bespoke, and it's a rangefinder style, and I kind of love it.
I mean, I'm kind of into the look. I think it's pretty cool looking. What size is the sensor?
It's APS-C.
Oh, you said that.
Yeah, I did. So
what lens mount is it?
Impossible to discern.
I see.
But it is an old Hasselblad lens mount for APS-C.
This one we're looking at here comes with a 18-55 f3.5 to 5.6 lens, so that's not great.
No, it's not
like
great.
A kit lens, and then this is used, but in like new condition, and it's $1,600.
Yeah, not too expensive.
How did you come across this?
I don't know. The internet just offered it up to me.
I think it's kind of cool looking. It's a weird grip, the way it's kind of a triangular looking thing.
Yeah,
it's a very big grip, but I like weird looking cameras like this. Everything now is so, like we get so excited when we see the colors on things like the Nikon ZF. So sometimes we get a color and that's fun, but like the physical design of cameras is all so similar. It's kind of fun to see something that's different and that like is kind of quirky and weird, and I like it.
Yeah, this one's fairly unique, and I think it's quite small, like similar to like a Sony NEX type camera, like one of those really small APS-C ones. But it's Hasselblad, and like you think Hasselblad, you want to think of medium format. I didn't even know they made these old APS-C cameras back in the day.
Yeah,
but I know I'm throwing this out there as things were better when things were worse, and what is better about this worse camera is the like you said, the quirkiness.
Yeah.
We have like the Nikon ZF line with all the colors and everything, but not too many like kind of weird, fun looking cameras. So I just want to throw this one out there.
I like it. It does look like a camera from 2013. But
yeah, it does.
I'm into it.
Cool. I'm not gonna buy it. It's like $1,600. I don't.
It's a little too expensive for to have like as a quirky camera.
Yeah. A little bit.
If it was like $600, maybe.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe think about it. I got other cameras to buy.
Yes, you do.
Anywho, all right, Daniel. What are we talking about today? We're gonna finally talk about these drones, or we're gonna talk about the Z50 Mark II.
Man, we probably need to talk about the Z50 Mark II because I know we've got a lot of people on this podcast that like Nikon. But we've had that drone stuff on there for a while. So do you think we have time to do both?
Let's see what happens.
All right, sounds good. So which one do you want to start with?
So I like, despite this being been on the queue for a very long time, I only know very little about these drones. And so let's start with the Neo, and you can tell me what the heck this thing's about.
Cool, sounds good.
I'm about to pour my water onto my iPad.
Well, mostly onto your little Bluetooth keyboard, which wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so the DJI Neo is a drone that came out pretty recently, like let's say sometime in the last couple of months. I don't remember exactly when. And it's one of the more unique things DJI has made, but it kind of competes with some other stuff in the market. So it's this tiny little like palm-sized drone.
When it says no RC, does it mean it doesn't have a controller or that it runs on Wi-Fi?
It doesn't have to have a controller.
What?
So it can use a controller. So I don't think it's only Wi-Fi. But you can fly it with just the app.
It looks like a Whoop. It's got like the Cine guard. Cine guards. That's the wrong thing. I was trying to say Cine Whoop and prop guards at the same time. It's got prop guards.
Yeah, so it does have prop guards, really small. The thing it's most similar to is a drone we actually talked about on the podcast a while back called the Hover Air X1.
Yes, I totally remember the Hover Air.
Of course you do.
X1.
And that was kind of a similar thing where it's a couple $100. Like this is the cheapest thing DJI has made probably in a long time. It's $200.
The Hover Air X1 is $300.
And so you can fly this, the DJI one. You can fly it without a controller. Like you can use your phone. You can use a normal controller if you want to. But you can also fly it without either of those things. So it has a button on top that lets you select between various quick shots. So DJI for a long time in their drones has had like these scripted shots you can get, where like the drone will look at you and then like fly backwards away from you or whatever.
Or do like a swirly thing or get like a pano or...
And so this one has a button on top where you can select one of those things and then you just like hold it in your hand and the drone takes off and does the shot. And then you hold your hand out and it lands in your hand and you're done. Like with no other like controller, not using the app, anything like that.
I feel like that's been the promise of DJI drones forever. And it's interesting to finally like have reached the point where that's the thing.
Yeah. And like, I can totally picture you having this in your backpack on a hike and you get to the top of the mountain and you're like, let's take a cool shot. And like, you just pull the drone out and tell it to do its thing and it does its thing. And you're not like having to, fly it around and mess with all that stuff. And like, it just kind of does it for you.
I assume that it's under 259 grams.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it's like 135 grams.
Wow. So like say you're out at, I don't know, the Smoky Mountains and you're like out near Klingsman's Dome or whatever. And you want to get that shot and you like hold your hand out, it takes off. And then the park ranger's like, who's got that drone? No, you can't have those drones. I'm going to confiscate it. And then you're like, well, it's not me. I don't even have a controller.
Yep.
It can't be my drone. And then it gets really awkward when the drone starts flying back towards you and you're like, someone's flying it at me. It's not mine, I swear. Oh my gosh.
You're holding your hands out like, I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Park Ranger. And then the drone just like calmly lands in your hand. So a couple of other interesting things about this. They recently added the ability to use it with their FPV goggles. So if you do want to fly it with a controller, you can also put their FPV goggles on and fly it around kind of like the Avata, which is their FPV.
So if you buy the goggles and the controller and one of these, is it cheaper than the Avata by like $400?
Yes, it's definitely cheaper.
Even with the controller and the goggles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because the Avata by itself is like 400 something. And so this drone's 200, so it's quite a bit cheaper.
This makes it seem like this is the cheapest and easiest way to get an FPV.
It probably is. It's definitely easiest. I still think you can probably get into FPV cheaper than this, and most FPV things you get would perform better in terms of like being able to fly faster, like do tricks, that sort of thing. But this is going to be way more approachable, so that's kind of neat.
Would you buy something like this from a DJI, or would you go buy like a Cine Whoop?
If I was advising somebody who wanted to get into FPV and wanted to go like deep into FPV, I still think I'd say get like a Cine Whoop or get like a FPV Whoop, like go that route. But I think that if you're just kind of like sort of interested in FPV, but you also want to do some camera drone stuff and like you don't really think that you're going to go like deep into the FPV side, I think this kind of gives you some best of both worlds where like you get something that's going to be easy to fly and you're not going to have to do all this configuration, but it still gives you like some of that feeling of like I can put goggles on and fly around. And I think it's going to be way more approachable than, having to like build something yourself or configure it or whatever. Like Like the FPV community is still kind of a hobby thing, and I think this is going to be more polished than that.
The goggles Integra, which looks like the cheaper of the two goggles, is still like $350.
Yeah, it's pretty high. But like last week, they actually came out with a new set of goggles called, I think, the Goggles M3, and it's a lower quality product.
I think they're called the Goggles 2.
So there's a Goggles 2, which is similar to the Integra.
$450. Yeah. They're super small. I don't know about these pictures. They look very dystopian.
Yeah, but if you look at the I think it's called the Goggles N3. That one's $230, and that's the newest one they've come out with. It's lower quality than the other ones, so that's why it's cheaper. But it is kind of like an easier entry.
Okay.
For people who want to do this.
$230. There we go. Same weird like future AI generated people. Oh, this is definitely an AI generated image. There's no way that's real. Don't even have to like have real products anymore.
Yep. Running down other specs. It has built-in 22 gigabytes of storage, so you can't swap memory cards. It's probably convenient, but it's also, hope you don't run out of space. Like you might be transferring stuff to your phone to try and, if you're doing a lot of video shooting at once. It's 4K 30 or 1080p 60. There's only one color space.
4K 30 or 1080 60.
Yeah, so video quality is definitely not as good as DJI's other stuff.
Is it similar in size sensor to one of their other products? Like, is this something that's more similar to the Mini? And I assume not the Mini Pro at all.
Yeah, I think it's closer to that, but it's a pretty small sensor. Like it's not even as good as the Avata. Like it's lower quality video. You're not getting any log options, anything like that. Yep.
Well, they got rid of like log on basically almost all of their non-pro drones, which was annoying. You can get like the D-Cine like instead of D-Log M, which is dumb.
That's mostly true, but the Air 3S that we're going to talk about in a minute does have D-Log M, so it's not only the pro drones.
Is it still the case where? Well, no. I remember that I've been very annoyed in the past about the whole D-Cine-like thing because it's like flat and whatever, you can grade it, and like I guess it's in Rec 709, but the D-Log M, there's no real good information on what color space that's actually in.
That one's kind of similar where it says log and it is a log profile, but it's kind of not real log. It's a little bit more contrasty than real log.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of weird. But this one doesn't have that at all. This one just has a single color space. And I mean, it's my impression from watching videos is that the image quality is fine. Like, I think it's good enough that you wouldn't be upset at it, but you just have to keep in mind kind of what it's for. Like it's a fun drone. It's for getting like cool memories when you go hiking or just like playing around with. This is not something where you're going to film with it and use that, like in a commercial or whatever.
No, this is more just it's for you. It's for the grams or what have you.
Yeah, for the grams. One thing is that it has an 18-minute flight time. That's much longer than what you'd get on most FPV Cinewhoops. So like the Cinewhoop I have gets like 4 or 5 minutes of flight time.
So if it's 18 minutes of flight time and you're doing like 1 or 2 minutes for every whatever, maybe you get like 15 moments out of this and then you have to swap the battery.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really that many. Like, 1 minute feels kind of ambitious, but like, let's say you can get, 8 to 10 maybe, or even that might be a lot. Like, let's say you get like 6 out of it. And if it takes 3 minutes every time, flight time, that's still pretty good. Like even on a single battery, you go on a hike, you take this drone and one battery, and 6 times during the hike, you can get like a cool little quick shot thing. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is for me, but I like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Like, I'm kind of interested in it just because I like drone stuff and it'd be fun to, see how it is for FPV. I think that it kind of, for me, is kind of like GoPros where I like the idea of it a lot, but I just don't live a cool enough lifestyle to justify it.
It's cheap enough that it just kind of makes sense The detection for the DJI stuff has gotten pretty good, but I could still see this running into a branch or something.
Yeah, that's one thing to note is that this one does not have obstacle avoidance.
What? How does it? What? Daniel, you can't. What?
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
That's the downside.
Daniel, how do you... wait. Just hold on. If it's going to fly itself, how does it not have all of the things that it needs to fly itself?
That's on you to fly it somewhere where it's not going to hit things.
It's just going out there blind.
Yep. So the good thing is, since it has prop guards and since it's so lightweight, it's definitely going to be more capable of handling stuff like that than some of their other drones. So like, even if this thing crashes, it's probably not going to break because it's so lightweight. But yeah, like, you're not going to want to take this to the Caddo Lake Swamp and let it fly around all those trees by itself because it's not going to be able to handle that. So that's a downside.
It's cheap enough that it could be like a lark. I don't know. I don't think there's enough places to use this thing where you're even allowed to do it anymore. I guess it's less than 259 grams, so you can just do whatever you want.
That helps. And I don't know. I mean, people can decide for themselves how much they want to follow those laws or not. But I think it's fairly loud, but it is really small. So like, in some ways it's unobtrusive.
Right.
But I don't know.
And you can do it quickly because you don't have to like pull out the controller, put your phone in it, and like whatever allows to clear the land or what, take off, land.
Yep.
You can usually do it from your hand and like just whip it out and get it back before anyone notices.
The price being what it is, I think it needed to be $200. I think if they made this $300, then at that point I'm thinking, I don't know if that's worth it. But
what if they made it $150?
Yeah, that'd be even better. But I don't know. Like, I'm still kind of on the fence about it. Sort of want to get one like before our next hiking trip, just because I think it'd be kind of cool.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know yet. Wait and see. Yeah, maybe see what the version 2 looks like or whatever. But kind of cool.
22 gigs of storage.
Not bad. Like, especially if it's 4K 30 video, like that's gonna last quite a bit of time.
I don't know what you're going to do with the video out of this thing if you get it. You don't even have a photo backup workflow.
Yeah. I have to get that figured out first, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's neat. I would definitely get it if I had other FPV DJI stuff. Like if I had the Avata, and like already had the goggles and stuff, it's like I can buy another drone for $200 and just kind of fly it around for fun. Sure.
I used to run Plex on my server and pointed it at my entire video library. That way, if I'm like, oh, I want to like look up this video, I can find it and then just like stream it wherever I am. And not like stolen movies, like literally things that I shot with my phone. And it's just like, oh, I remember that like birthday party thing. And I want to like go look up a video of my dog. It's like, I can like stream it from Plex and see it. And I was like, kind of use that in a way like one would use a photo library. But I haven't tried that out since I've switched to Synology. I think I have Plex back up and running, but I don't remember. That might just be like something that's out there that I haven't resolved.
Yeah. And for something like this, you definitely want a way to go back and watch this stuff later.
Naming those files, it makes it still kind of like the easiest way to find videos still.
Yeah.
I wish that like the photo recognition thing that all these softwares could do would work for video as well.
Yeah, maybe that'll be next. It does seem like that would be good.
There's just too many things like go back and tag and sort out.
I agree.
Anyway.
Yeah, so that's the Neo. DJI also more recently came out with another drone. And this one's more similar to like their regular, like the Mavics we're all familiar with. Yep. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but
yes, you do.
I think this is worth talking about because this one to me is like I think this one's pretty good. So this is the Air 3S. So it's kind of their new mid-range, like normal camera drone. And it has a 24 millimeter main camera and a 70 millimeter tele.
Nice.
So you get that second camera zoomed in.
Okay. And
that's similar to the Air 3, but what's new in the S is that it now has a 1-inch sensor on that 24 millimeter camera.
20 what?
So the wide camera has a 1-inch sensor.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
isn't that what's on the Air 2?
I haven't. No. So the Air
half-inch.
The Air 2 had like maybe a half-inch sensor, or
and
like
the Air 2S was 1-inch.
Yes. Yeah, because I have an Air 2S and mine has that 1-inch sensor.
Okay.
But when they went to the Air 3,
Uh-huh.
so the Air 3 has both cameras, has the wide camera and the tele.
Okay.
But the Air 3 has a smaller sensor. It has the 1/1.3 sensor.
Okay.
And so now it's like they've come out with the S version where it's the same as that, but it has a bigger sensor.
Got it. And it's 20. How many megapixels is it?
So the wide one is 50 megapixels and the tele is 48.
Okay. And so are either of those quad bear?
I think maybe they both are,
Because
actually.
that was the deal with the 1/2 on the Air 2, was that it was quad bear, and so you could shoot 48 megapixel RAWs or 12 megapixel JPEGs if you like one needed to kind of choose between the two, or you could do like the punch in and get like the 12 megapixels in the middle and get like a 2x or whatever.
I think these might both be that way too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So like camera wise, it's pretty good. And basically all of DJI's stuff now, until you get up to the Pro line, has that 1/1.3 sensor. So like they have the Mini 4 Pro, the Air 3, and maybe even the Mavic 3 standard, like not Mavic
Classic.
3 Pro, but like, Mavic 3 Classic. I think that might also have that 1/1.3 sensor. And so they all have that. And then when you get to the Mavic 3 Pro, they have, bigger sensors. And so this drone's interesting in that it's a little bit cheaper and it has the Air name, but this one has that better 1-inch sensor.
No, the Mavic 3 Classic has the a 4/3 sensor.
Okay, so when you get up to the Mavic 3,
and it's got an
Air.
adjustable aperture.
Yeah. When you get up to the Mavic 3, those cameras are better. But all the like lower end drones, this one has the best sensor out of all those.
Yeah, you have to get to the Mavic 3 or the Mavic 3 Pro to get like actual D-Log and all that sort of stuff.
But I think what they're saying is that this camera has better image quality than the regular Mavic 3.
Really?
So I saw that somewhere. I don't know if that pans out in reality, but that's what DJI is saying.
I'm sure that they would.
Yeah.
I do like being able to get a telephoto.
Yeah.
That's the coolest thing, like innovation in drones in recent years, is
I agree.
adding that longer lens.
Yeah. And a lot of times I find myself wanting to get a tighter shot because, if you're filming a person from the air, you don't really want them being like this tiny little speck. But the closer you have to get to them to get that shot, like suddenly you're having to worry about power lines, trees, it's louder for the people on the ground. Like for a lot of reasons, it's nicer if you can be farther away. So
this seems like a pretty good general improvement over the Mavic Air 2S.
I definitely think so.
Like
it also has 42 gigs of storage built in.
Okay.
Which like I love having built-in storage because if you forget the memory card, it's just that ruins you. And so having like a backup, where it's built in, is a nice improvement. It also has a 45-minute flight time, which is definitely longer than mine. It
just seems like they took the things from the Air 2 and the Air 2S, slapped them together, made a 3S, because like the Air 2 was a faster sensor. Like you could shoot 240 frames per second if you needed to, but then when you went to the 2S, you couldn't do that, but you got better low light. And so it was like two different drones for two different purposes, but this one has like the larger sensor. If you need it, it can shoot 1080p up to 240 frames per second. It's got that 50 megapixel wide. They added the telephoto. It seems like it kind of combined the two.
Yep.
Which is great. And I think that they added 10-bit as well with their 2S. Yeah. So like my drone doesn't have 10-bit. This one has 10-bit D-Log M or whatever, but even though D-Log M is just a bunch of marketing garbage. While we were talking about the other thing, I tried to look up like to remind myself what the deal is with D-Log M, and it's like wider than Rec 709, but not as wide as Rec 2020, and there's no real documentation for how to transform it, and so they're just giving you like some weird color space with some strange gamma that you basically have to grade yourself because people want flat footage, but they don't want to give you actual D-Log.
Yeah.
It's kind of stupid.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
Either support it or don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. Also, unlike the Neo that we talked about, this one has object detection in all directions. So on the older Airs, like the 2 and the 2S, I think it was maybe just front sensors. I don't know if it had them on the sides. The Air 3, I know, did have them on the sides, but the 3S has it all the way around, and they also upgraded the front sensors to use LiDAR instead of optical. So that should be a little bit better performance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So overall, I think, and the price for this, I can't remember what it is drone only. I know with the Fly More combo where you get like the 3 batteries and stuff, I know it's like $1,600 for that. I think that might also be with the controller that has a screen. So that's like the like premium, like this is like everything you need to go kit. And that's a little bit higher than the Air 2S was. Because I think the Air 2S Fly More was like $1,200, $1,300. But this one to me feels like if you're filming, like if you're going to use this footage for something, like for, like you make YouTube videos or you're doing like paid work or whatever, I think there's a pretty good argument for using this over something like a Mavic 3 because it's still quite a bit cheaper than that, but you get some really good features. And I think it's cool that they brought all this down to the Air line. And for me, like with an Air 2S, this actually feels like a pretty reasonable upgrade over what I have. So
Sure
I think
does.
it's cool.
We haven't talked about the Air 3. I even forgot. I keep forgetting the Air 3 exists. I'm looking at the comparison on DJI's website between the Mavic 3 Classic and the Air 3S. And the Mavic 3 Classic is not that old. It's like a year old at most. But they are less than $200 difference in price, which is surprising to me.
Yeah.
When I look at like the list of features here and the fly times and all that sort of stuff, I mean, you're basically choosing between D-Log, actual, a telephoto camera, or a larger sensor.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's substantially a larger sensor, but the resolution is obviously less. It's like 5,000 versus 8,000 pixels across. But I don't know. It almost seems like the Mavic 3 Classic, I wouldn't preclude that. In comparing it to the 3S. I mean, the price is so similar that you're
comparing drone like drone only in both cases, and it's still only $200.
Yeah, drone only. It's a $1,099 versus $1,279. So it's like $180 more.
Yeah,
and I don't know. It's like if you're going to do more low light drone stuff, or you need the variable aperture and you don't want to have to deal with the NDs as much, like when you're in the air and you got to come back down and change the ND and bring it back up. Maybe the Classic makes more sense. Yeah. They seems like they slotted this in the line just well enough and kept their pricing tiers and features in check. Which like sometimes DJI doesn't do that. Sometimes they'll like release a drone and it's like the more expensive drone is just worse. Why would you buy it?
Yeah.
But they seem to have slotted this in pretty well under the Mavic 3 regular.
Yeah,
which
it's interesting.
They still now have what is it? The Mavic. Sorry, they have like the Mini Pro, the Avata, the FP. Wait, the Avata.
The Avata is an FPV drone.
The Neo, the Air. I'm lost again now.
Yeah.
Neo, Mini Pro.
I think they do have both a Mini and a Mini Pro.
Air, Mavic Pro, Mavic Pro Cine, Avata. They have like 9 drones, not including the Inspire, 10 drones.
Yeah. They have a lot, but I do think they've done fairly well at it's basically, for the most part, a sliding scale. Like you pay more and you get more features and better quality.
They have a Mini 4K, Mini 2 SE, Mini 3, and Mini 4 Pro.
Yeah. I think on the low end, they're kind of falling into the Apple trap with the, where they keep all the old stuff around because they want to have something at a lower price point.
Yeah, you got to hit all those price points.
Yeah.
There's just so many, Daniel.
Well, and we've talked on this show about how in some ways drones are kind of gotten boring. And it just seems like, for the most part that, it's like, another drone, like we have one, we don't really need these new features. But I do feel like both of the ones we talked about today kind of offer something notable where like the Neo is a totally new category for DJI that I think is kind of cool. And the 3S is just a better DJI drone, but it's better enough that like, I just thought it was worth pointing out, I guess, that like as this stuff gets cheaper, as the technology gets better, features that used to be definitely like solidly in the Pro side of the lineup are working their way down to where even if you're a person who just wants to spend the money on an Air rather than a Pro, like you're getting some really good features.
For sure. It does seem like the Air 3S is a good jump over something like the Mini 4 Pro. for a while, I felt like the Mini 4 Pro was the right drone for most people. I would maybe still argue that because it's under that weight limit. It's the same like 1 for 1.3 sensor, but it's still like decent video performance. It's going to be what most people probably need out of a drone. It's like $800 instead of over $1,000. But I could see like how you could easily step yourself up to an Air 3 if you needed like some of those newer features you wanted, the telephoto, but then even jump even further to the Mavic if you needed the better sensor.
I feel like the line is if you're flying your drone for fun, Mini 4 Pro is probably the right answer. If you're a really serious YouTuber or if you're getting paid for it, I would definitely be thinking Air or higher.
I would agree with that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
cool.
New drones, exciting.
New drones. And you're gonna buy like one of each, right?
I'm not opposed to upgrading mine. Like it feels like I use the drone a couple times a year, which isn't very much, but like when I use it, we use it for videos and it's always a shot that people are looking for and get excited about. And when we do paid work, it's like I want the quality to be good. A lot of times we're shooting in low light. So if the low light's better, that's something that's meaningful. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I haven't changed my opinion on it, which is we need a drone for what we do, and it's like kind of required and adds that extra bit. But I don't really fly it that much anymore, and it's kind of like I have it for when I need it, and you got to keep that tool good and like keep up with the technology and replace it whenever you need to replace it so that it is of good quality. But then beyond that, it's like kind of use it for what you use it for, and don't be without.
You're not really going out to fly your drone for fun.
Yeah, I should do that more.
Yeah, maybe so.
But irregardlessly.
Definitely not a word, but okay.
Now can we talk about Nikon?
Finally, I guess so.
I don't really know if there's too much to say here. It's more of announced. It's been in a few people's hands. There's like not a production version, but Nikon announced the new Z50 Mark II.
Yeah. So the Z50, is that their lowest end APS-C?
Yes, the Z50 was their low end APS-C camera.
Okay.
And I think that one came out 4 years ago. Is that right?
It's been a while. I mean, they were due for a Mark II, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely due for a Mark II. I just can't remember. I think it was like 2019 or something like that. So it's been 5 years since the original Z50 came out.
Okay.
I think that my dad and I bought a Z50 for my sister. And she has one of those cameras.
Okay.
I've used it maybe a few times. I've known other people that bought it. And it was like when it came out and up to, it's kind of gotten old, right?
Yeah.
But it's like a decent camera. It's Nikon's cheapest option, but it wasn't a slouch. It was a good APS-C Z-mount camera that took fine photos.
And I'm never going to diss that kind of thing because when I got into doing photography more seriously, I got a Nikon D40, which was their lowest end DSLR. And that was kind of like my introduction to really caring about taking pictures and like manual settings and, going out and doing photography. And I had a lot of good memories of using that camera. So I'm sure that, having stuff like this lower in the lineup, I think is really important because that lets people get in. And some of those people may eventually go on to, to do photography for, the rest of their life. So cool.
So maybe like one of the weirdest things about this new Z50 Mark II is it doesn't seem like they changed the sensor. And
that is weird.
Like a lot of the conversation about whenever the Z50 first one came out was, this is basically the D500 sensor, which is like a 2009 sensor or something. It's very old. Maybe, no, I think it's like 9 years old. So it would be 2015. It was like a 2015 sensor.
Okay.
And like, but we paired it with the processor and like, here's this, it's great in this camera. And now here's the Z50 Mark II. And they're like, it's basically the same sensor as the Z50, but we are pairing it with the X Speed 7 processor. And like adding the new processor to the old sensor does do a lot.
Yeah.
Because it can read it faster. It can maybe pull more data off of that hardware.
Sure,
and like you can do a lot more with like upgrading the software and the processor on top of the sensor. But at some point you end at the limit of the sensor of like it can only resolve so much noise.
Yeah.
The ISO is only so good, like you can only do so much with it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've been pushing so hard on, like the Z6 Mark III has that partially stacked sensor, and then the Z8 has that really super cool stacked sensor. Same with the Z9, and we're like, oh wow, and like almost all of Nikon's cameras have some sort of stacked sensor, and they're like really emphasizing on speed and video, and like they're pushing the technology forward in their mirrorless lineup. And then the Z50, it's kind of like, oh, we kind of have to refresh this. Just put the same sensor in there.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing. Like that feels like the kind of move you'd make if you wanted to release a $400 camera.
A little bit. I mean, it's not like they didn't do work here.
You said it has the new processor.
Yeah, bringing the new processor in, getting that 3D tracking autofocus, and adding like all the modes. Like you can now do bird detection and train detection, and it does better like human and eye detection and autofocusing in that way. And like you can now shoot like 11 frames per second raw, and so it kind of boosts a lot of those features. They swapped out the screen, so now it's a flippy screen instead of a tilty screen. Make it a more video focused kind of thing. And so,
am I seeing here that's weather sealed?
Yeah,
that's a pretty good feature for a lower end camera.
Okay, very very true. And like lower end, the thing is still $960.
Yeah, that's a painful price.
Yeah, that's more expensive. No, it's not as expensive as an XT 3050.
It's more expensive than a XM5, isn't it?
It is more expensive than an XM5, which is something that would be very competitive with this. And it is more expensive than an R50, which is probably the closest competitor to this. The R50 is a very good camera for the money.
Yeah, I mean but what's interesting to me about this is I think this is Nikon's lowest end camera, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Canon still has the R100 below that.
Yeah, they do. No one should buy that camera.
R100 is a terrible camera. Nobody should buy it. But like, it's interesting to me, I guess.
Unless you already have that camera, then it's a great camera. And you know what? You get to take those pictures, get into photography. Like, use what you can.
I mean, for real though, yeah. But like, it's just surprising to me that this is their cheapest entry, and it feels both compromised in some ways and is that expensive. Like, just on the sensor thing alone, I would be way more inclined to pick the XM5 over this.
Sure, yeah, and like I would too. I would pick the XM5 over this. I wouldn't like compromise that. Like, yes, it's an older sensor. It's not going to have as good noise performance, but they're still like doing everything they can within it. You can still shoot in N-Log, and you can do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and like. You're going to kind of cap out on like 60 frames per second, 1080 and that sort of thing. I don't actually have those video specs written down in front of me. I probably should pull those up. But like it's going to be a little limited on some like the higher frame rate type of specification, but they're bringing as much as they can within like the bounds of the sensor. And so it's going to be relatively competitive with that price bracket.
Okay. What's this I'm seeing about picture styles?
You don't know, Daniel?
I don't know.
I can't look up video specs and tell you about picture styles at the same time.
I guess you're going to have to decide which one's more important.
Literally can't do it. They're taking a page out of Panasonic's book, which was copied from the homework of Fujifilm. And you can make your own custom picture styles and load them into the camera. And then now you got like your film simulations or whatever.
It's interesting, man, because it feels like they Fuji has always had that advantage of like that's what set Fuji apart was the film simulations and having these built-in looks and like easily being able to switch between them and get a different result every time. And it feels like these other companies finally picked up on that and finally saw like, oh, people like that. And they added it, and I guess what I'm getting at is it feels like they caught up very quickly to Fuji.
Yeah, well, I would say maybe yes and no. They're kind of all tackling it from a different perspective. I think that the people that Fuji was trying to sell their cameras to, like Fuji is saying, like these are looks that we have built based upon film stock way the film looks.
They're like bespoke, carefully curated looks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And like with the X-Trans sensor and the way that it renders noise, and like I've started shooting on film more, and like for real, the noise in an X-Trans raw photo, looks closer to actual grain than the uniformity of noise in off a Bayer sensor. And it's like Fuji is like very earnestly leaning into these are intended to look more like film as much as we can, and like that's the whole point. Whereas like when Panasonic's copying it and now Nikon copying them, they're more like saying, okay, people are doing that because they want to have certain looks straight out of camera and they don't want to have to like do all that editing as much in post, and they want to like have their cool look, set it up, and then use it. And then the approach they're taking is like, we're going to make that infinite. You know, if you can like find one that you like, or you have like a creator that you follow that's been making them, or you're making them yourself, you can make your entire version set and then upload those into your camera. And that seems way more flexible than like the Fuji film simulation, which like the film simulation stuff, as far as making your own custom recipes and that whole recipe community, is pretty good, but they are still all based off of like, okay, start with classic chrome and then like bump the color and change the chroma blue and then change this other chroma and like da 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 da. It's like
it feels to a certain look, more limited, and also like a little bit more fiddly than just being able to download a lot from your favorite creator.
Exactly. It does seem like maybe it's harder to get things set up initially.
Yeah.
Like if I had a Panasonic or a Nikon and I was trying to like set up my film simulations, I'd have to like find the look that I want and then carefully make it so, and then get that loaded in, and then try some test shots and make sure that it's like rendering the sky the right color of blue teal that I want and all this sort of stuff. And then eventually like find one that works, or maybe I download one. And I don't know like how well that's going to work in comparison to Fuji, probably just as fine, but it does really feel more like a Fuji, especially like with their like, hey, we're going to put the film simulation dial on the camera. And so it's like you click through that hardware thing and you can't change them, and they're like preset, curate is where you use, and like these are what they are versus here, make your own.
It's definitely easier to get started with the Fuji thing, but a lot of that like getting started challenge feels like they could solve that very easily by just including a couple of presets.
Yeah, and I don't know to what extent the presets Nikon has. Like you're supposed to like go to the app and like download whatever to the camera. I think that like, I don't know how true this is, but I feel like camera people are more, no, you know what? Never mind. I changed my mind, because there's like two different kind of camera people.
Yes, there are.
There's people like me, which are like gearheads. And then there are people like, I don't know, my dad, who take pictures and like, you're like, there, I see the thing and I'm going to take the picture. And I'm doing this because I enjoy the photography of it. And whereas Lucas is doing it because he enjoys the gear side of it. And I feel like the gear people are going to be the ones that like get in like making them just right or whatever.
Yep.
But I feel like maybe the power of defaults. Most people don't change the defaults.
Yeah.
And if Panasonic and Nikon and eventually everyone else in the camera community don't make their own defaults.
Yeah, they need to be shipping these things with like, you know, let's say minimum of 5 different looks you can apply.
And I would say that both Nikon and Panasonic have a very good black and white option. Like Nikon is even stuck a black and white, like you can just switch between black and white and color on the ZF and on the ZF, which is cool. And like Nikon has a very nice looking monochrome, and then Leica has licensed their monochrome for Panasonic, and so both of them have super good black and white. But all of the other stuff, like I don't know. Like I haven't spent any time in the LUT Lab thing for Panasonic to see what's there. I would hope that people are making like Porta whatever and Kodachrome and all those kind of things, but I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like it's slightly eroding one of the big things that set Fuji apart.
I think so, but I think that the branding that Fuji has is more powerful than these features.
Yeah,
and I don't know
that's probably true.
Like someone who's buying a Fuji for the aesthetic of the camera and the film simulations, I still feel like you're not getting those out of these other companies.
Yeah.
Like, until they'll have to bring they're not calling it LUT Lab. These profile things, if they have to bring those to the ZF. And at that point, it's like I have a full frame ZF and now I can set these simulations. Maybe that's a little more appealing. Something like the Lumix S9, that kind of makes sense. But even still, I think that people are going to be way more inclined to buy XM5 over this if they're interested in film simulations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. And specifically thinking about the XM5 versus the Z50 Mark II, I'm like, how do you not pick the XM5? It seems like a better camera at a lower price.
I think you pick the Z50 Mark II if you want a more traditional camera, because this has a viewfinder, and it has a decent viewfinder. They're once again, Nikon, the only company that's discussing the brightness specification of their viewfinders. This thing goes to 1,000 nits, and it's like 2.6 million, 3.36 million dots. It's small, like which can be troublesome sometimes for people, but other than the size, like this is a good viewfinder, and you're not really getting that on like the XM5.
Yeah,
and so if you're looking for something that's, I guess XM5 is PSAM, but if you're looking for maybe a more traditional look of a control and you need that viewfinder, like this could make sense.
I gotta say though, I'm looking at the Nikon ZFC right now, and that camera right now in B&H, $950. And I mean,
the ZFC is $950.
The ZFC
it's so old, Daniel.
That's the problem. Like it has a lower megapixel.
It has a newer sensor.
It's newer, but it's 21 megapixels, and it has the previous generation X-Speed 6 image processor.
That's kind of a big deal. Like the jump for them from the X-Speed to the newest one was significant.
Okay,
I just want to throw that out there.
And I don't know if this is weather sealed, but I mean, it's the same price as the Z50 Mark II, and I don't know, like how do you pick one over the other? You know, it's kind of it's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, it's tough for sure, and I know I personally would be hard pressed to decide between the two, mostly because I am a bit of a sucker for how the camera looks, just as much as how the pictures look.
Yep.
And I don't know. I like smaller compact cameras because I like to bring them with me everywhere.
Yeah.
And so if it makes it harder to bring with me everywhere, I'm maybe less inclined. But I'm not necessarily being favorable to the Z50 Mark II because it's about the same size as the Z50, which was a very, very small camera. Like it's not like super duper small, but it's compact. I mean, like you're not too much larger than something like an A6600.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of in, like you have like, or maybe like an XT3. It's maybe not like XT30 size, but it's between the two. And it's. I mean, we're not talking like Canon R6 or Z6 size.
With this being, weather sealed, but being at a kind of high price, I feel like one compelling reason to buy this camera would be if you have an expensive Nikon setup, like maybe you have a Z8. And you've already got some lenses and stuff, but you kind of want like a cheaper, smaller camera that you could take on trips. Maybe you're going to kayak around in the swamp and you don't want to carry your $4,500 camera. I think it could be good for that, but I'm just kind of having a hard time with this as an entry-level camera at the price it is and like using such an old sensor. I don't know.
I do think that I think it goes the other way quite well also. Like it has the much improved, like if you ignore the sensor, this is a great improvement.
Yeah.
They added a flippy screen to make the video features more forward. They added the LUT Lab thing. It can shoot 4K 30 full width. It can shoot 4K 60 up to with a 1.5 crop. They previously they had a bunch of controls on the buttons. They have since moved those controls to buttons. One of the things Nikon tries to do is make the button layouts very similar between their cameras. This now has an extremely similar button layout to the Z6. So you can start with this camera in Nikon and have a very comfortable path forward to a Z6 or a Z8 because it's like an easy upgrade because your lenses are going to work. The buttons are all going to be in the same spot. All of that like muscle memory and everything, which is something that Canon's done for a long time. Like Canon's work like Canon's work. Nikon's kind of doing the same thing here. It's just that the sensor is going to be noisier. You're going to have pretty bad rolling shutter, so you're not really going to want to shoot any really high-speed video or do any high-speed burst. It can shoot 11 frames per second RAW, but like that's like not super, super great, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It does 30 frames per second JPEG in normal mode, so not even like for JPEG, fine. Those are going to be electronic shutter and kind of like jello all over the place. So if you want to save the money and like you really want to get into Nikon, I think this is like an okay entry level. I wish it was $200 cheaper.
I agree with that. Yeah, I'd be feeling a lot better about it if it was. I mean, honestly, even if it was $900, at least I'd feel like that's meaningfully lower. But when I look at this price, like it feels close to $1,000 to me, which just seems high for what it is.
Yeah, and they did add a headphone jack. it's micro HDMI, which is kind of a bummer. And then it's the same old small battery. So that's the other kind of bummer thing, is that the battery is not going to last.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems fine. I like I said, I was kind of having a hard time getting excited about it. I think that sensor is really giving me a pause.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, competitive with, so the A6700 is going to be an infinitely better camera, but it's $1,400, maybe on sale for $1,200 sometimes.
That's it feels like that's in a separate category.
Yeah, viewfinder entry-level camera, APS-C, 24 megapixels, 30 megapixels, or whatever. The Fujifilm owns APS-C. Like they have the lens lineup and everything. Sony's right behind them as far as like lens support. Nikon doesn't really have any good APS-C lenses. There's the Sigma Trinity of Primes, which are on everything anyway, and then like that's kind of it. They have that 40mm f2, and then
it really feels like your main benefit is that you can use those full frame lenses that'll work on the higher end Nikons.
Yeah. You have an upgrade path if you buy full frame lenses. So A6700, there's the R50, which kind of has the same problem, but like there are some smaller full frame prime options for those, like that 50 and the 35 millimeter. That one's cheaper, and it's probably a comparable photo camera. The Z52 is probably gonna be a better video camera, especially because you can shoot an N-Log and then use the red N-Log like conversion thing.
Right.
That's kind of cool. We talked about the XM5.
Yeah,
R50,
I feel like the XM5 kind of wins just in terms of if all you're going to get is this camera. I feel like you have more options for lenses on Fuji.
Yeah, for sure. I do like the Fuji a lot more for like if you're going to live in APS-C world forever, like I've chosen to do, I guess. But if you're not, I mean, this seems like the best sub $1,000 option if you're choosing between this and R50 and I don't know. Well, no, because XM5 is under. So
yeah, if you ignore the XM5, I would say it's pretty good. But I think I'd be leaning more toward the XM5 for this.
You're just picking between Nikon and Canon again.
Yeah. Basically.
When did the R50 came? R50 came out last year, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't think this is substantially better, other than the whole N-Log thing.
Yeah.
Like the R50, you're not. I think it probably has like C-Log 3, which is terrible. This has N-Log.
Yeah,
which is better.
I definitely think. I definitely think if you're a Nikon guy who already has Nikon lenses, I mean, this seems like a perfectly good camera at the price if you're looking for like a small travel camera. But new person with no existing stuff, I don't think this is like it's not attracting me as an option, I guess. You have to choose. It's basically the same thing as always, where you choose your lens ecosystem. Because if you're like, and not everyone knows that, right? Like if you're just getting into photography, saying to somebody, it's like telling a new grad out of high school, like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Like pick which college degree to go into. Right.
It's like, hey, I know that you haven't even figured out what the exposure triangle is, but whatever camera you buy now, it's really hard to change brands, and you better decide what lens ecosystem you want. Here's all the positives and negatives.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, well, this one has Canon colors, but this one I can like pick my colors.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's good they refreshed it. I'm glad that it's there. They need something this low in the lineup. I feel like the sub $1,000 camera market is still kind of thin right now as far as options. Like they're all compromised a little bit because they're cheap.
Right.
But it's like Sony doesn't even have anything that's sub $1,000 that's new. You have to go back and buy like an A6400 or something.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's just inflation and the market and stuff. There are fewer cheap cameras these days, and these prices we're seeing, like, when I bought my Nikon D40 back in like 2009, it was a $600 camera. And I mean, I'm not looking up inflation numbers right now, but like $950 probably isn't that far off from like everything costs more now. So, some of it is just that we have to adjust our metric for like how much does an entry level, like good camera cost.
Sure.
And maybe it's reasonable. I don't know.
I mean, the R50 is $630.
That is so aggressively cheap.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big difference compared to this camera.
I guess like they're selling this as maybe a higher end product. And
I think they are.
I probably want to go back and look at the R50 specs to see maybe how well it compares. I would probably expect it to be close, but this one probably has a better EVF and
well, and
sort of
you do get that
probably better autofocus.
You get that picture style stuff where like if you want to customize your thing. I mean, with Canon, like it's always kind of been, you better like Canon colors because that's sort of what you're getting from those cameras, and so this gives you a little bit more flexibility, and maybe that's something people are looking for.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it seems like at the end of the day, it generally comes down to the mount. If you're trying to decide between any of the cameras that are in this price point, or really any camera in any price point. Well, once you get in the mid-range, I think more comes into it. But at this lower end, it's like you're probably not the only camera you're ever going to have, and so you kind of have to decide like where you go from here.
Yeah,
and that's a lot to ask of somebody.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, how are you going to decide what the rest of your life's going to look like?
Yeah, just buy Fuji.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.